wonder if your risk number is in alignment with your portfolio's risk number. And what the advisors that leverage us typically find is it's about 88% of the time that the portfolio has more risk than the client wants or realizes.
Yeah.
And that moment is a very powerful moment when the advisor flips it over and says, well, take a look, you might be a risk 45, but your portfolio is a risk 92, okay? That's a moment where a lot of advisors tell us the blood drains out of the client's face.
Yep.
And we call it the ACAT form moment. Like that is the moment that they go, I've now been told something really important by somebody who's using data and math to show it to me, not just telling me these words like, oh, I think you might be in an aggressive portfolio. Maybe we should put you in a moderate portfolio, right? It's a different thing, and it builds trust with clients when you can use quantitative data to tell the story. And a big
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners.
This is going to be a fun podcast, first because of my incredible guest, Aaron Klein. Aaron's the co-founder at Riskalyze, the company that literally invented the risk number, while twice being named one of the world's top 10 most innovative companies in finance by Fast Company magazine. Aaron also is heavily involved in a cause near to my heart, adoption and orphan care, and he co-founded Hope Takes Root along with his wife, Casey. Now, the second reason it's going to be fun is because we are actually recording this in our brand new state-of-the-art media studio. Aaron, you're the first guest that we've had here. What do you think of the new studio?
I am so honored, and it is absolutely incredible. You know, the Advisors Excel story has been an incredible one to watch unfold. You're one of the fastest growing wealth management businesses in the country. And just to be in this beautiful, amazing studio to check out the support you're giving your advisors is just incredible.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad you came and did it because we have some advisors coming in next week. So we wanted to get a little rehearsal here.
I'm the guinea pig.
That's right. Make
like
sure everything works well. So, well, let's jump in, man, because you guys have been a great partner for us on the wealth management side. You're the CEO of Riskalyze, which is one of our core partners. Walk us through your journey of how you decided to marry finance and technology together to co-found Riskalyze.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I first of all, I started an entrepreneurial business really, really early at the age of 12, working in the afternoons after school for my dad. And, he taught me a lot about like everything I know about that. Starting from the standpoint of like, it was a very tough business. It was like wholesale distribution of automatic gates and security equipment.
Oh, fun.
So everybody had the same product. Everything was commoditized. And what he taught me was this: number one, the grit that it takes to be an entrepreneur, right? And every advisor knows what we're talking about there. Number two, that relationships are everything in business. That if you take great care of your clients, they'll take great care of you. And, again, it's so applicable to a financial advisor's business because guess what? Anybody can get ETFs, right? Anybody can open up an account and invest in the markets. But it is the relationships that we build with our clients and the real value that we deliver to our clients that keeps, financial advisors at the forefront of what they do and the value they deliver to clients. And so, and then the last thing that taught me, honestly, was that I wanted to be in a better margin business than wholesale distribution of automatic gates and security. So, that kind of led me into the internet, and I started learning about that and playing with that, and started a couple of businesses, mostly that didn't work out, but was trying a lot of different things. Ultimately worked for a division of an options brokerage firm, building these technology products for options traders. And I had a buddy of mine who was a financial advisor, and I said to him one day, Mike, it is crazy how the average individual thinks about the concept of risk. And he said, if you think that's crazy, you should see how many of us financial advisors think about it. We just haven't had the tools in our profession to really understand who our clients are and match that up with the amount of risk in their portfolios. And as I kind of started to double click on that, it struck me that, we are an industry that has largely used terms like conservative, moderate, and aggressive when, there's a reason why, when they were building this amazing media studio, they didn't say, well, remember, they want a moderately conservative walkway leading up to their moderately aggressive studio. Like, they used feet and inches on the blueprints to make this thing come together. And so we really felt like, the risk number is about putting the feet and inches into that process for financial advisors, and it creates a language for advisors to be able to converse with their clients and engage with their clients. And ultimately, if a financial advisor can help their client understand how to process and react to volatility and risk appropriately, that is what really transforms a fearful investor who makes bad decisions into a fearless investor who makes really great decisions. And ultimately, that's really what you need. Every one of our financial advisors needs the clients who will make a series of good decisions, because that's how that financial advisor can deliver a great long-term financial outcome.
Well, we're going to talk about a couple things today. So one, you are a great entrepreneur, and I've got to see, the growth in that story. And so much of what we talk about on this podcast is how good advisors can become great business owners or entrepreneurs. So I want to dive into that, but this will be a little unique. I actually have not had a lot of guests that have been in our industry, right? A lot of them have been more thought leaders on leadership and entrepreneurship. So the timing of this is just really great too, because we're sitting here, we're recording almost the end of July. When we see what's going on right now, talk of a recession, the market's down, 15 to 20%, depending upon this kind of great run up that we had in 20 and 21. Walk through, because Riskalyze has been a great tool for our advisors. How does Riskalyze help advisors and investors handle or prepare for those changes between the bull market that we've seen and then the dips? And just, I know you've talked a little bit about how to really pinpoint that, but explain a little bit of how exactly you do that and how the advisor leverages that.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've had the incredible privilege of supporting you as a partner now for years.
Yeah.
It might be like 7 years.
I was going to say probably at least 6 or 7.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years. So, that's been pretty incredible. I would say there's a lot of advisors and a lot of firms that are waking up right now going, whoa, the 2020s, pandemic, civil unrest, divisive election, massive inflation, invasion, and now recession. If you believe in reversion to the mean, the rest of the decade is going to be super, super, simple, and there's not going to be anything that will happen until 2030 or something like that. I'm not betting on it. This appears to be the risk-first decade. And so it has definitely, in a number of ways, just kind of raised, been an inflection point for us, raised our profile, because advisors are trying to find a better way to talk about these things and illustrate these things with their clients. And that's really where we started, was at the intersection of where advisors and clients engage. If I think about all the incredible advisors, Excel advisors who leverage this, they are early on in the client engagement. Maybe even before somebody becomes a client, a prospect might be coming to their website and clicking "What is my risk number?" and getting engaged with them there. And that's a great question that sparks a lot of curiosity, because as soon as you discover that maybe your risk number might be a 45, let's say on a 1 to 99 scale, looks like a speed limit sign, as you know. So the client comes out being a risk 45. They want to, the next question the advisor asks is, well, let's flip the coin. I wonder if your risk number is in alignment with your portfolio's risk number. And what the advisors that leverage us typically find is it's about 88% of the time that the portfolio has more risk than the client wants or realizes.
Yeah.
And that moment is a very powerful moment when the advisor flips it over and says, well, take a look. You might be a risk 45, but your portfolio is a risk 92, okay? That's a moment where a lot of advisors tell us the blood drains out of the client's face. And we call it the ACAT form moment. That is the moment that they go, I've now been told something really important by somebody who's using data and math to show it to me, not just telling me these words like, oh, I think you might be in an aggressive portfolio. Maybe we should put you in a moderate portfolio, right? It's a different thing, and it builds trust with clients when you can use quantitative data to tell the story. And a big part of that is that we don't engage in predictive guesswork. We do not engage in the process of trying to guess what the markets are going to do. We're going to look at the securities and the solutions and the strategies that are in the portfolio. We don't tell advisors what to invest their clients into. We're just going to take a good mathematical look at what's in the portfolio and use the quantitative data that we have from its track record and history to say, well, this is what would be normal behavior for this portfolio 95% of the time in the future, okay? And as a result, the advisor is able to point out to the client as they come aboard as a client, they say, look, there's 95% of this risk that I can quantify for you, right? And this portfolio in a normal market environment is going to be somewhere between it might be like down 8% to up 12%. Over the next 6 months. Are you comfortable with that? Does that fit, your comfort zone as an investor? If it doesn't, we should have a conversation about maybe how that needs to impact our financial goals and how that needs to impact what we're trying to accomplish with the portfolio. But then they point out, hey, there's 5% of that risk that we can't quantify. These are things like black swans, pandemics, global financial crises, now this kind of inflation, induced recession, right? So by setting the table and talking about 5% probability events, Excel advisors are having much better conversations with clients right now, because it's not, why are you not performing for me, Cody?
Yeah.
Okay. It's, hey, we've talked about this. This is one of those 5% probability events. And, nobody can predict a 5% probability event, but if there's one thing we know, it's that the worst time to sell is at the bottom of a 5% probability event. Like, we've got the data. All the people who sold at the bottom in 08 and 09 have still yet to recover. It's the people who hung on and who rested on the fact that they had made the right decision before the 5% probability event came along. They were able to stick with their decision and kind of get to the other side and ultimately look at the roaring bull market they've enjoyed in the past. That's the kind of stick with it and sticking with the decision that you made that advisors are able to communicate and help their clients to see and understand.
Well, and I think even in our industry, we've seen so many reports about when people try and do it themselves, how much they underperform, right? And
totally.
And the value of an advisor, and it's something we preach all the time, is being a financial advisor and doing it well is a very noble profession.
Yes.
It makes a dramatic impact on people's lives. So especially during a time like this, I have, I think you said it well, our advisors, they're still taking lots of calls, right? Because people are still worried right now.
Of course.
But just being able to have that conversation of like, hey, we're fine,
That's
and
right.
I think that's a big part of it is we've talked about this, you understand.
We've built credibility over time as we've
Correct.
had those conversations.
So you're able to better help the consumer stay the course, which
That's
is
right.
the most important thing, right? That you
That's
don't
right.
sell out at the worst possible time and
Well,
go
and
to
when-
cash.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we got into this, I will tell you, we were a little bit naive at the very beginning of the company's founding. We said, what we really need to do, we need to defeat what behavioral scientists will call the mother of all biases, confirmation bias, right? It's what leads us to see facts and data that seems to confirm what we already have a bias for believing is true. Okay, so we're like, we got to defeat confirmation bias, because what happens is people see red, bad in the markets, and that means sell to their brains, okay? And they say green, good, and that means buy to their brains. And if you just follow that, you will buy at the high and you will sell at the low all the time. Rinse and repeat for 30 years and you'll be broke, right? So we're like, we got to defeat confirmation bias. That's what we got to do. About a year into that journey, when we're still working on the core technology, we're kind of like, I don't really think you can defeat confirmation bias. And what clicked for us is we realized instead of defeating confirmation bias, we needed to help financial advisors harness confirmation bias. So when you have laid that 95% historical range out in front of your client, when you've educated them about 5% probability events, when you've shown them what is normal for their portfolio, they are able, when this kind of market event hits, they call their advisor and go, are we going to be okay? And the advisor is able to say, listen, you made the right decision. Look at the data here that showed you that you made the right decision, okay? Remember what we talked about with 5% probability events, and it gives the client the permission to leverage their confirmation bias to say, I made the right choice, and sticking with that choice is the right decision going forward.
One of the things you talked about a minute ago, too, and I see with the advisors we support, obviously, you support thousands, right, that are with other firms also, almost all...
Not nearly as cool.
Well,
though,
no, hopefully not.
Yes.
But I would say, though, almost always, and I'm just curious what you see across the whole group of advisors that you support, but I would say almost always the client has a portfolio that is way riskier than they're comfortable with. Is that what you see?
100%.
Yeah.
And that goes along with the 88% number that I quoted of particularly with prospects. When an advisor is talking to a prospect, it's about 88% of the time that the portfolio the prospect is bringing through the door is riskier than they want or riskier than they realized. And, of course, they don't really know how to communicate that. So their words are typically something like, now I understand why my portfolio felt a little choppier than I was comfortable with. Now I understand why my money was bouncing around a lot more than I felt comfortable with, right? And so it has been a big aha moment for financial advisors to be able to show them, you're telling me that this is what you're comfortable with, but this is how you're actually invested. And it's important, by the way, to bring the topic of risk capacity into the conversation and say how much risk do they need to take in order to reach their goals. But so many times the amount of risk the client wants is actually a little bit more or equal to the amount of risk they need, and yet the way they're invested is far in excess of what they either want or need. And that's a big opportunity for financial advisors who like to use data and quantify things.
It's just, and the tool is so, with technology, sometimes some of these tools can be hard to use, hard to understand. I think you guys have done an incredible job of making it really easy. I think the speed limit sign, or what looks like a speed limit sign, makes it really easy for the consumer to understand. And then I would tell you the other thing that I know our advisors love, we help build out the portfolios on the back end. So then if they want to take them from an 85 to a 45, we already have a portfolio built that's kind of maximized to that. So when they sit down and say, like, would this look better? Would you feel better with something like this? It is an easy transaction.
They can take their advisor's Excel model and click on that and pop it up in front of the client, and the client is like, that's what I want.
And I think, and maybe you talk about this, this wasn't a question I was going to ask, but there's been so much talk around fee compression and things like this. And what we've always told people is, if you lead or talk about the fees that you're paying, it's going to lead to that conversation, versus if you lead with this conversation around building a portfolio that's aligned with what's comfortable for you. It changes that, in my opinion, what I've seen.
Totally. And what I would say is just this, like, there are people maybe very early in their career, who feel like, hey, I can just go do this myself. And they might be right very early in their career. They're not dealing a lot with taxes. They're not dealing with a lot of complexity. They don't have to worry about long-term estate planning and things like that. But it doesn't take too long into your career that you, particularly if you've got an intense career and an intense job, and you've got a family perhaps, that you start to go, wait a minute, like, first of all, this is really complex, right? This, like, tax rules are very complex, and estate planning rules are very complex, and a lot of this stuff is very complex. And second of all, it's very important. It's important that they get it right for their family. It's important they get it right so that they can retire with security and dignity, so that they can maybe send their kids or their grandkids to college, so that they can change the world through nonprofit giving. It's important. When things are complex and important, that's when we know that we're not going to just turn it over to a computer and try to do it ourselves. We want a trusted human. And at that point, the fee conversation is not the number one thing that we're worried about. If we're delivering a path through complexity to simplicity, we are solving for that as financial advisors. That is priceless. Now, I know that doesn't mean we can charge 100% fees, but it is priceless to get that kind of help and support. And at that point, the fee that you might be charging your client becomes an afterthought, because you're the person guiding them through the complexity to a place of simplicity.
Yeah, we tell advisors all the time, you would much rather compete on value than cost.
100%.
Right? And I think you kind of said it at the beginning, even as you got into founding Riskalyze, right? You want to be in a business that has some margin in the business. It allows you to build a stronger business. So it's a good way to compete. So you guys have had tremendous growth, but as you look forward out, maybe say 3 to 5 years out at Riskalyze, are there things you're really excited about with the company and growth of it?
Yeah, so much. We're in quite the transition, because we were a very office based company and culture, and today I joke that we're 200 decentralized tokens on the blockchain. We've got about 25 people in an office that used to have like 125 people coming to work every day, and the rest of the company has gone very remote. And it's the same that we're seeing in all the stats and all the numbers of people moving, and kind of the disbursement of people across the country. So we're having to be very intentional about investing in that, about making sure that we create new ways to communicate, new ways to work. It has really been a boon for us in some ways, because we said, well, if this is going to be our future, we're not going to be in the mushy middle. We're going to go embrace that future. And so, I had this amazing moment a couple of weeks ago where I dial into our senior leadership team meeting, and I'm sitting in Boise, where I moved to with my family. And I happened to have like a couple of other folks there in Boise. We had a new CTO starting. Our chief product officer had come in to like spend the first couple of days. And we all dial into the senior leadership team meeting, 9 people on the call, and I look around and go, there's nobody dialing in from Auburn, California, our headquarters.
Yeah.
Like not a single one.
Huh.
And, so all that to say, it's interesting times. You have to be very intentional about it, and you have to think about how to communicate, but we're hiring like amazing talent. We've hired a chief marketing officer who is absolutely brilliant, and he's in British Columbia, in Canada. We've hired a new CTO in Portland, and we've hired, just folks all around the country as a part of growing this leadership team to the future. So a lot of hard work, but there you go.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I
Sure.
may jump ahead. I know we were going to talk about culture later.
Yeah.
I think you said something really important there. We've done a little bit of the opposite. We've said we don't want to be a remote, so we're going to be. But you said the most important thing is I don't think you can be wishy-washy,
That's
right?
right.
Like you've got to decide we're either doing this,
That's right.
or we're doing this and go all in. Going, let's say, all remote.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced so far in that? Like maybe even specifically to like culture and how you're keeping your people connected.
So what we found is that doing it that way, and by the way, I think a big driver of that for us, that decision for us, is that we're a technology business.
Very much
and
so.
Software engineers are much more like I don't know if you've heard the joke about the software engineer who's an extrovert.
No.
That they look at your shoes instead of their own shoes. So that's the big
Yes.
difference. So they kind of naturally, I'd say most of the software engineers kind of naturally have gravitated, like they want to be in a work from home kind of environment.
Yep.
Okay. So as a technology company, that's kind of what shifted us towards that side of the fence. But you can't be in the mushy middle, and you've got to really embrace it. And so there's a couple things we did with that. Number one, every dollar we might have saved on real estate, we're moving over into travel because we are bringing teams together on a regular basis. Nothing replaces the opportunity to connect with people in person. It just doesn't.
It doesn't.
And so we are bringing teams together on a very regular basis, either at our headquarters in California or in central locations across the country. We are doing a lot with technology to drive communication. One of the tips that we recently figured out, I'm on the board of Snappy Kraken, another great Advisors Excel partner.
Yes.
And they've been a virtual company their entire history. So we've been learning a little bit from them, And they use Slack for chat, and they have a video record feature. And so it allows you, that moment when you really want to just talk to the person because you could tell them something in 2 minutes, or you could take half an hour and write an email to them, right? But you can't find time on the calendar to get on a Zoom call. You're out 2 weeks trying to find time to get on a Zoom call with that person. So you just record in Slack like a quick little video message and tell the person, just like you stop by their desk and say, you got a minute, okay?
Yep.
And then that goes across Slack and gets there. That's been the biggest challenge, right? Is how we communicate with intentionality, but with informality, right? And that's hard. And I would say the other thing, particularly in regards to culture, is that we have not really had a problem getting culture to transmit across the screen. We can bring people aboard, and we can, get them into our culture and really versed in our culture, and they connect with it and they get really excited about it. The hard part is maintaining the connection to culture over time.
Yeah.
And the connection to your teammates. And so that's where we've really, like I said, we've taken every dollar that we might have saved in real estate. It's not a money-saving thing. We've moved it all into travel because we've got to be bringing these teams back together. And we're about to make it a bit of a rule. I think we're settling in at something like teams have to be together at bare minimum 2 times a year.
Okay, that's a good idea.
And it's going to be a rule, because if you don't measure it and you don't expect it, it won't happen.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, we have some advisors, I don't know that a lot, but that are starting to go more virtual or remote. So everyone I talk to, and there's people listen to this podcast that aren't, financial advisors, and definitely are there. So I think that's important to be very specific in how. That's what I said, and I think one of the things we've talked about of being back in the office is we do want to be this like connected community, and it helps that we had a lot of people here already.
Yeah, that's right.
95% of our employee base was right here in Topeka, so made it a little bit easier.
Yeah,
like I said, I think it's more of an expectation on the technology side for sure.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about scaling the business, because you've done that really well. So you guys started Riskalyze, and I think 2011.
Yep.
So 11 years later, Fast Company's 10 most innovative companies. Forbes recognized you in its FinTech 50 twice, I think. What were some of the keys to scaling as quickly as you can? And maybe you can even talk about the scale that you've had, where sometimes it feels like longevity is not easy to achieve in the fintech world.
Yeah, it's true. I think there's a few different things. One is that we have absolutely been very focused on culture, on mission, and on values. And I've heard it said that culture is not what you say, it's what you do. Mm-hmm. And the one thing, if there's one thing that I'm just incredibly proud of our team and our company, it's that I watch our people live our culture and live our values every day. We actually put them online at riskalyze.com/values because it's a pretty integral part of who we are. And we when we first started the company, it was like 3 people, right? And we're working for the first 2 years just building out the core technology and trying to get a product to work. And it was 2013 when we rolled the product out of beta and the first advisors really started using it. And it just kind of took off like a rocket. And about the middle of 2013, we had hired a couple of people, but we're like basically 5-6 people. And I remember saying to my co-founder at the time, I said, this is working. Like, we've now got to think about how to turn ourselves from a startup into a business. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole different thing. And we have to figure out, like, we started the year at 3 people. We ended the year at 10 people, right?
Yep.
And then the next year, it was like we ended the year at 25 or 28 people or something like that. And then it just kept going like that. And, I remember saying, we've got to figure out how to be the same organization at 10 people that we were at 3, and the same thing next year. Mm-hmm. And, we had written down a few values when we started, because I'd come from kind of a rough culture before, a bit of a blame-based culture, And I kind of felt like that was one of the things I did not want to see happen. I don't know if you know if the number one tell of a blame-based culture, right? It's where the company's second priority is achieving its goals, right? The first priority is that if the company doesn't achieve its goals, I or my team do not get blamed, right? And so, what's funny about, we were trying to build a high feedback culture.
Yep.
And so what's interesting is that if people come into a high feedback culture from a blame-based culture, when they hear the feedback, all of a sudden they go into Game of Thrones mode, right? They're like, "Ooh, you're trying to kill me, aren't you? Like, which tribe are you a part of? Which clan am I a part of? Like, I'm trying to figure this out because you're trying to kill me." And you have to, I tell people, like, if you come here from a blame-based culture, you've got to be very mindful that feedback in a high communication, high feedback culture is constructive, and it's designed to help us be better as a team, and it drives our values of accountability and teamwork and communication. So all that to say, we started summer of 2013 when we were 5-6 people. We started doing mission and values training for every new Riskalyzer who came aboard. I teach it personally still today. I do it just about every 6 weeks or so.
Yep.
And every new class of Riskalyzers that comes aboard, I'm personally doing mission and values training because it's so critical that they understand the basis on which our company is formed. And we always say, hey, we love having new people come and helping us evolve and change the culture as we grow towards the future. We're not looking for anybody to come and 180 us in the other direction. But if you want to come and join and help us grow and evolve the culture to the future, that's a welcome thing.
One other thing I've noticed, just knowing you now for, like I said, actually I think I knew you a little before we actually started working. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But one thing that I've noticed that you have done well, I'm not saying that the product hasn't gotten dramatically better and constant improvements, but you've been able to stay fairly focused on what your mission is, right?
Yeah.
And very focused on this idea of risk and how to really manage that well. How big of a role has staying focused played in being able to scale and grow? And then maybe as I say that, how do you, as a side note, because I'm probably one of those entrepreneurs who, I see every idea and think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
How do you, as the entrepreneur, the owner, like evaluate other opportunities as you're continuing to grow and scale the company? So I know I asked four questions.
That's great.
In that question there.
Focus has been a big component of our values for a long time, because we've always said we want to make a deep impact on the advisors we serve and not try to boil the ocean. And if you think about that concept of trying to boil the ocean, it's impossible, right? Like you can't. There's just too much water there. And so you can work and work and work and work and work, and you'll never achieve that goal, but you can make a deep impact if you focus and you choose to make a deep impact. So we actually have, like, first of all, lots of internal debates on this. Whenever we think about broadening at all, is that a controversial thing?
I'll bet. Yeah.
And I would say, like, if we've made mistakes, honestly, it has been when we've tried to broaden a little bit too quickly and when we haven't stayed focused on deepening and making sure that we're making a deep impact. It's hard sometimes to define that, but like it becomes pretty clear if you step back and look at it with clear eyes. So I would say, a big part of driving the focus has been having that open and direct communication culture, where we say we set aside rank and title and we use data to, like, convince each other of things. And as a result, I do have to remind people that, like, that's for real, because they'll come into a meeting, they'll see somebody challenge me and say, Aaron, that is wrong. Like, you're wrong on that. Like, you're way off. Here's why. And they'll talk about why, I don't have the right perspective on an idea or something like that. And, there are people who are like, does he know that guy's the CEO? Like, does he know that? And we have to remind them that, like, no, that's the culture we've tried to build, that we set aside rank and title, and you can do that in meetings I'm not in as well, right? And so that has created, I think, the environment for us to really keep the financial advisors our North Star, right? Remember that ultimately our mission is empowering the world to invest fearlessly. We believe in doing that by equipping financial advisors with great technology that allows them to really democratize access to their advice, because if more people on planet Earth get access to great advisors, the world is going to be a better place. And so, that level of focus, I think, has really served us well. And, I feel like we say no 1,000 times a month.
Yeah.
And, financial advisors will say, it'd be so amazing if you just built this and built that and built this. You're so good at it. And I often say, if we tried, and I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody else, but if we tried to be all things to all people, we would be mediocre at everything and not particularly good at any one thing. So, we've got a lot of opportunities in front of us. I'm super excited about this next chapter in our history, as we grow our leadership team and all these kinds of things. But we're not going to do it by becoming an unfocused conglomerate. We're going to do it by being really focused about that North Star of how we serve the financial
When you
advisor.
said that, we won't name any names, but, even other people that we've worked with, you can tell the ones that, and I think you guys have always been so great at delivering on everything that you've said you're going to deliver. And I think that's the difference, right? It's a very focused versus, like, trying to be all things to all people and not doing any of them real well.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question from a leadership standpoint. How... That idea of being able to give and receive candid feedback.
Yeah.
How hard was that for you initially, or did that come naturally? Because what I see is a lot of the advisors we support, as they grow, it may start off where it's just them and a person or two in the office. As they start growing their business, now some of them have 50, 60 employees.
Wow.
And that's a big transition to go from
is.
you're kind of the advisor, making all the decisions, to now you have this team. So what was that like as you grew?
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Or any lessons maybe you have along
for
the way?
I feel like I should sit down and try to count it up, but I feel like my job has been a new job, like, multiple times.
Yep, agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just a totally different job when we had 3 people versus when we had 10 versus when we had 75 versus maybe now 200, right?
Yep.
And at each stage in our history, it has been, what I found so interesting is our values have stayed true. I mean, they've evolved a little bit over time, but we've stayed true to our values, and they've really stood the test of time. And so, honestly, we had open and direct communication in there from the very beginning, but we had it in there from the very beginning because we've all worked in that organization where, you can't say that here, or that's the elephant in the room that we don't talk about, and things like that, right? And it's exhausting. It's a lot more fun to work in an organization where people can be clear with each other and there's no hidden agendas, and we can be direct about what we think about things. And so, I guess the thing that I would advise, advisors who are turning into CEOs, right, is that they need to be really clear about the organization they want to be and the organization that kind of fits. Like, don't try to force it. Don't try to be Steve Jobs, for example. I can't bring myself to yell at employees for, coming up. I will go in and be tough on people, and I will say that needs to be better. This is going to screw up our company. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not the kind of person who will yell at people and say that their work is crap. Like, that's just not who I am. And it's funny because in technology, that's the cool way to be a CEO right now. I don't know the exact analogy with financial advisors, but I would just say, like, don't try
It
to
could be
just
similar.
Yeah. Well, don't try to just be like a famous financial advisor leader that you read about.
Yep.
I think it's great to learn from people who have gone before us and have built great things in our profession. But, you've got to think about who you are as a person and who you are as a leader, and then figure out how to build an organization that reflects your strengths as a leader, because that's what your people are counting on, is that you'll put together a culture and an organization and organizational norms that they're going to love working in. And so, it is a really interesting challenge to scale, but you've got to do it with intentionality. You've got to know where the organization is going. And I think, the biggest thing is you've got to manage that complexity of the cell dividing and all those new people coming aboard, and how you communicate who we are, where we're going, how we're going to get there. And I remember somebody telling me a long, long time ago, you cannot over communicate those things. And boy, have I found that to be true, because I can't tell you how many times I've talked about, I feel like I'm sick and tired of hearing myself talk about this, this, and this. And then I sit down for a dinner with, a group of our employees, and somebody says, well, what do you think about that? And I go,
I've literally said that
I've
a thousand times.
1,000 times, right? But I don't take that as a negative that they asked. Thank goodness they asked, because they need to know, okay? And so, over communication is the key to scaling a business. I'm pretty convinced at this stage.
We've had so many people I've had on the podcast before. That's a consistent theme you hear over and over again, is that you can't over communicate, and it's true. We find ourselves doing the same thing. I'm like,
we actually shut down our company every 6 weeks for about an hour and a half.
Okay.
And that is our, we literally put the phones on, and we tell people, like, we've got a skeleton crew kind of monitoring chat because they can participate while being on chat. But, like, we're not answering the phones for the next 90 minutes because we got to get aligned and on the same page to serve you more effectively. And we do that every 6 weeks. We call it Pulse. We used to call it Team Lunch, but then we opened offices in other time zones. Then it became Team Brunch. And then Poland came on the, and we're like, we're going to give up our fixation on food. So we call it Pulse. And every 6 weeks, people are getting tapped into the pulse speed of what is happening in the company and staying aligned. And if you're not over communicating that, pretty quickly, people don't understand why they're there and what they're doing.
So walk me, what's that agenda look like? What are you covering in that? Because I think that would be great for so many people. We do something a little similar, but I'm curious what you cover there.
So we, first of all, we'll typically have, for our organization, we'll typically have 30, 40 people in Auburn that week on a Pulse week. We've actually started with our new remote culture. We'll be doing it for the first time next week. We will have Pulse days in key cities across the country where we have enough scale of people to, like, bring everybody together in a co-working space.
That's cool.
They'll watch Pulse together, and then they'll work for the rest of the day together, And so, but it's 90 minutes, and we've always got, there's a slide deck that we've prepared, and it's going to rotate across different leaders in the company. I will typically have a few key things that I want to share about things that are going on, but we're going to rotate and get updates on key initiatives from different leaders across the company who are either popping onto the Zoom screen or they're in person in Auburn and walk up to the stage. And so, it's and then we take a lot of questions. It's designed for questions.
That's good.
One of the things that we found is we crossed this Rubicon of about 50 people, and the questions just kind of stopped. Like, people just stopped asking questions in Pulse. And it drove me a little bit crazy. I finally came to realize it's a little bit natural, because people don't want to feel like they're wasting other people's time. So they feel like their question is unique to them, and they don't want to feel like they're wasting other people's time. So we have them put their question into the channel. If they're willing to be recognized, we'll pop them up on the screen, let them ask their question. But sometimes we just read their question into the room.
That's good.
But we get those questions into the room, and it gets everybody on the same page about what's going on and where we're headed.
That'd be great. I think that idea of communication, everyone should be doing something like that for sure. Let me ask one more question, then I want to jump to a completely different topic.
Okay.
So I think I've told people we've always done a pretty good job hiring, at least in our area. We've always been kind of a destination employer and get a lot of applications in. Obviously, I think everyone I talk to, and I was just with a lot of our advisors for the last 2 weeks, I think everyone's struggling hiring right now.
Yes.
Are there any things that you have done in your process to identify, attract great people, and make sure that they align with what you're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I would say, it's so different from a few years ago. A few years ago, we would post like maybe an admin assistant role at our office in Atlanta. We get 1,500
Yeah.
applications. I don't know if you know what you do when you get 1,500 applications for a job. First thing you do is you delete 750 of them because you can't afford to hire unlucky people.
Yeah.
That's a joke. I'm just kidding. But we're in a different world now, right?
We are.
And so there's a couple of things that we do. We are considered to
That's
be.
a good joke.
Well, we're considered to be a pretty. I'm trying to find the right word here, but like it is not easy to get hired at Riskalyze.
Yep.
Okay. But we actually went a little bit off the rails in a few years ago. Okay. And what had happened is, up until a certain period of time, I think it was 2015, I personally did what I called the veto interview with every single hire. So it's 10 minutes on a video call, and I'm going to do 10 minutes on a video call with every single person that is about to get hired, and I reserve the right to veto that person if I don't think they're a good fit for our culture. Okay, so as you might expect, I never actually had to veto anybody. It was just a great quality control check.
Holds everyone accountable along
Right,
the
holds
way.
everybody accountable.
Yep.
They're like, I'm not going to put this person in with Aaron. Like, that's not going to work. So it was a great quality control check. So at some point, they're like, Aaron, we can't get the veto interview on your calendar for like 2 weeks. Like, you're the bottleneck here. You're not
Yep.
letting us scale and grow. I'm like, ugh. So my big mistake is, instead of replacing that process, I eliminated that process. Big mistake, okay? Within 2 or 3 years, we were in a place where it wasn't my leadership team. It wasn't even the layer of managers beneath them. It was like the people who worked for those people had come in, and there were hardly any standards. We joke about people who are not a good fit for our culture, and we call them talented jerks. And we talk about people who are a good fit for our culture but aren't very good at their jobs, and those are nice idiots, okay? Well, at that point, we'd reached a point where we were not hiring either talented jerks or nice idiots. I think the bar was like, can fog a mirror, okay?
Yeah.
And this wasn't super widespread, but there was just a few.
Just you could
We
see
had
it.
an all-company retreat, and about the third time I went, how did that person get into our organization? I said to myself, there's something wrong here, and you've got to figure out how to. I kept saying to myself, I wish I was still doing the veto interview. And so what I ended up doing was replacing the process, and I wish I'd had the foresight to do this back then. But we went through a little bit of transition, had to move some people out of the organization, had to rehire some of those folks, and today we're in such a healthier place because of what we replaced it with. I went and hand selected about 15 people that we call our 9 values team. And I hand selected them as the people who they live and breathe and care about our culture. And we rotate people in and out of this team. But these people, they've got to be cross-functional, and they do a cross-functional 9 values interview as the last step in every hiring process. So what do I mean by that? Well, I don't want an engineer to do the 9 values interview for an engineering candidate, because they might get blinded by their brilliance and their competency, okay? Like, I want to have a salesperson or a support person who, works with advisors interviewing this engineer, because they will have no idea whether this person is competent at doing their job. They're going to be just focused on whether or not this person can actually fit in our culture, okay, and be a great contributor to our culture. And that process has just worked so well. There have been maybe 5 or 6 times that we've had basically the 9 values feedback comes back and it's somewhat negative. And on each of those times, there have been, out of the 5 or 6, I would venture to bet half of them we've said we're not going to move forward in hiring that person. The other half of them, we've gone and had another 9 values interview done to kind of triangulate the feedback, and we came back and felt good enough to go ahead and hire the person. But again, it's just a huge quality control check, because I don't even know the ones that don't ever get submitted to me because they had negative 9 values feedback, and they know I'm going to say, no, we're not hiring this person if they can't, both be, if they're either a talented jerk or a nice idiot.
That's so what's so funny about that? For a very similar story here at Advisors Excel, and so this is something I'm pretty passionate about too. We had a very similar thing where early on, me, Dave, and Derek did all the hiring, right? And then we got to this point where we were so busy. It's like, and we hired someone who would take that over. So we outsourced it. And then I'll never forget one day Derek came in and he's like, man, I don't know that I would have hired some of these people that are here.
Yeah.
You know, and you looked around and it was that. You're like, eh. And so we did the same thing for 10 plus years, you know, for the majority of our hiring, probably from, 50 employees to, let's say, 600 employees.
Wow.
We did a final veto interview forever. So every single person. Our team came to us last year and said, hey, because during COVID, we kind of paused hiring for a while, make sure we saw what was going to happen. Then we got backlogged on it. And Dave and I's schedule was so crazy also that they're like, hey, you're killing us. You're slowing us down. And I think one of the things you have seen is, where you could used to wait maybe a little bit longer to move people through your process.
Right.
That started speeding up. So you just gave me a great idea. I'm going to go tweak that a little bit too. So
there you go.
Yeah, because we were very hesitant to stop doing that veto interview.
Right.
But kind of had to out of necessity.
Yeah,
so I love that.
I literally sit down and we'll spend time with the folks on the 9 Values team and talk to them about some of the challenges they've had with some of those interviews.
Yeah.
So it just allows us to infuse that cultural filter and scale it in how we grow the
Well, and
organization.
even some of our advisors, and they've heard me say this a lot, so it'll probably feel like preaching to them, but like some of them get out of the hiring process when they have 10 or 15 employees. And I think that's a huge mistake. I said, if I could figure out a way to do it through 600 employees, I think you can do it. So
that's right.
It's just such an important part of it. Okay. I want to switch topics just a little bit because I think a lot of people probably think we know each other from the work relationship, which obviously we do, but we actually met first at a Life Song for Orphans event out in Tucson, if you remember that. We were both there with our wives, and my wife Jen and I, orphan and adoption care is a huge thing for us. I know it's a big thing for you and Casey too. So maybe just talk about why orphan care adoption is such a big thing for you all. And then I know you've founded a nonprofit, so I'll have you talk a little bit about that also.
For sure. Well, we kind of felt like adoption was, God's plan A for our family. My wife and I have never been diagnosed with any reason we couldn't have kids biologically. It just didn't happen for us right away. And my youngest sister was adopted, and so we were very comfortable with the process, understood the process, and really were excited about that. So that's what kind of started us off on our adoption journey. And we brought home our first son, Spencer, from South Korea when he was 8 months old. We brought our daughter Emma home from Ethiopia a couple years later. She was also 8 months old. Got us involved. By the way, they're now 15 and 13. And then, it was shortly after bringing Emma home from Ethiopia that that I met some of the folks at Lifesong.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out a way. It was a life-changing trip to Ethiopia. I was trying to figure out a way to get more involved in that. When international adoption in South Korea is kind of driven for cultural reasons. International adoption in Ethiopia is just poverty, right? And I don't mean to knock anybody in this great country of ours, but you have not seen real poverty until you've seen poverty in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And it's just a whole different level. It's a whole different level. And so that really, made us want to figure out we can't, the solution, international adoption is beautiful, but the solution is not for one continent to just adopt an entire continent's kids, right?
Yep.
There's got to be holistic solutions that try to prevent kids from becoming orphans in the first place. And so that, ended up meeting Andy Lehman at Lifesong, a mutual friend of ours. He invited me to go on a trip, to Ethiopia later in 2010. Went and did that. Got to get involved in a school project there. So we started raising money to build these buildings for this school, and it was a couple of schools actually in that area, in that community. And I mean, the school project was about 250 kids when we got to see it. We got to see it grow to 1,300 kids. We'd never really raised money for stuff like this, but we just found other Ethiopian adoptive families, started bringing people who were in our industry on trips over there. So I once a year, I'm kind of taking teams of people over to see the school project. And on one of the trips, we go to a public orphanage to try to see, try to show the team what we're trying to prevent. And we meet the kid who ends up becoming, over the course of 4 years, the oldest Klein kid, Teddy. And Teddy came home in 2016. He was about 11, about to turn 12. And so he became our oldest. So that's our three. They're now 18, 15, and 13. And I've got 3 teenagers. I don't know who did the financial planning on that one, but there you go.
That's cool. Talk a little bit about Hope Takes Root and the nonprofit
Sure.
that you set up, and even a little unique approach to how you're doing it.
Yeah, so Hope Takes Root is a project that we've actually partnered with Lifesong to do. So it's kind of housed inside of Lifesong. What I love about that organization, I know it's near and dear to both of our hearts, is how much support and giving they give. They're not empire builders. They just love to support and give resources and infrastructure and help to people trying to do great work in orphan care and adoption. And so I just love that. So we love supporting them with our time and our talent and our treasure. So Hope Takes Root is really an idea, and it's an ambitious idea right now that is frankly struggling in Ethiopia because you've got COVID and you've got war.
Yeah.
And so we are still trying to figure out like the right formula for this. But in effect, what our thought process was and the vision that we're pursuing there is, when kids get to about 10th grade in Ethiopia, I want to say last I saw they have about only a 60% pass rate in the 8th grade exit exam. And, our schools in Ethiopia, knock on wood, have had a perfect pass rate of 100% out of 8th grade. I think it's 5 or 6 classes now they've had 100% pass rate, so it's incredible. When they get to 10th grade, the 10th grade exam is going to determine, are you going on university track or are you going to go to maybe vocational school? And, I think it's the top 4 or 5% that will end up on university track, and the rest of the kids are going to end up in some kind of vocational track. But guess what? Vocational school is not free. It costs tuition. These kids typically are in a situation, if you're orphan, if you're a vulnerable kid, you're not in a situation that you can really afford vocational school. So the first idea we had was, well, why don't we build a vocational school that's tuition free? And then you think about that, you're like, well, you're just going to be raising money for the rest of your life trying to maintain a vocational school. Pretty limited impact. So our vision has been, can we figure out how to create a for-profit business that is in effect a vocational school hiding in plain sight, okay? Where we're going to, spend a good chunk of the revenue hiring student workers who have no experience, no job skills, but they are orphans and vulnerable kids that, in effect, need the training to learn those job skills, okay? And the 3 shareholders in the business have all signed pledges that any profit participation we have to take from this for-profit business in Ethiopia, after the business pays its taxes, if we're forced to take any profits, we'll just donate them back through Lifesong to the Hope Takes Root initiative. So that's what the focus initially has been, a technology app to basically deliver some what we would call rudimentary small business marketing tools over a smartphone app that Addis shopkeepers and small business owners could use. It's got some neat traction going on there. It's been a bit harder to turn it into revenue, but we've got 5 student workers who are learning job skills there right now, and a few full-time employees working really hard on building this app that's called Kanash App, which is the local brand for discount. And so they're hard at work trying to make that a success in Ethiopia right now. Again, they've run up against a lot of challenges with both war in Ethiopia and COVID. But they've been doing a great job pushing through those challenges, and we'll see where that program goes in the future.
That's cool. Well, I think it's obviously it's a topic that's pretty big in the United States right now with some of the things going on politically, and I just think the more we can do to support, orphaned, vulnerable kids is going to be important. So I appreciate that. It's cool. So good work. Okay, we're going to switch lightning round. Just a couple quick questions. So we're at the end of this. I've asked everyone these at the end of the podcast. So first one, as you look back over the past 2 years, since COVID hit, is there one lesson that you've learned that you're going to take with you for the rest of your business or life?
Oh, that's a great question. Stick to your principles, right? Know who you are, and don't just let narrative and fear control you. Like, look at the data, stick to your principles, know who you are. And I don't mean that in a political sense. I just mean that in a sense of like, when the world feels out of control, it's really important to be grounded and know who you are and stick to your principles.
That's good. Okay. Second question. What is the one thing that you've done that has taken you from a good leader, entrepreneur to a great leader or entrepreneur?
Well, it's kind of you to say that. I would say get coaching. I've never worked without having some kind of coach, some kind of mentor who I could turn to and totally trust and say, here's what I'm struggling with, and here's what I need to understand. And a lot of times they don't have some kind of silver bullet answer, but it's somebody you can talk to who you trust, who can help you think through problems and solve that. So, getting help, getting a coach.
That's good. Well, on that topic, so third question, is there something that you're doing this year to drive your personal growth that you're excited about?
That's a great question. Well, the big thing for us this year is we relocated our family up to Boise, Idaho, and that's been big. And it's hard because kids, particularly 18, 15, and 13, are not super excited about moving all the time. And it was one of those things. We have some extended family up there in the Boise area. We've always loved the area. We have the chance to build a house up there, which is really exciting. But we realized family is really important to us. And if we wait until our youngest is out of high school, when it might be convenient, the oldest is going to be really firmly rooted, and then we're just never going to do it. So for us, we know it's the right decision for our kids. A little bit hard, a little bit challenging, a little bit out of our comfort zone, but we're just loving it so far. And it's a different pace of life, and it's a great outdoor recreation area. So I don't know. That's where we're investing a lot of time this year. That I think will have a pretty strong impact on our family and our kids in the future, and we're excited about that.
I think too, anything you do that takes you out of your comfort zone,
that's right,
is a big part of it. So even something like that's a big thing that's going to drive your personal growth.
That's right.
So, okay, fourth question. Okay. What is the one book that you've recommended most to other leaders?
Oh, that's a great one. Well, I'll tell you what. If you're going through any kinds of challenges in your business, and right now there could be some advisors going through challenges in their business. There's a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's written by a guy named Ben Horowitz, who is now a venture capitalist, but was a startup entrepreneur and built a company from nothing into a $1.6 billion company that they sold to Hewlett Packard. And just a fascinating set of stories and principles and lessons from that. But my favorite one from that book is he just talks about the fact, he, in a really bad funding environment in the dot-com crash, took his company public with very little trailing revenue and not a whole lot of cash in the bank, right? Because it was the only move that he had in a really bad situation. And his phrase there was, "There's always a move." So even when it looks really dark and really bleak, there's always a move. And your job as a CEO is not to sit there and just panic, but to focus and say there's always a move. And I got to figure out what the next best move is for my organization. I've loved that book because, even if you're not struggling, there are things that keep you up at night when you're building a business because you got a lot of people relying on you, not just your clients, but also your employees. And, I don't know, it was, in a weird way, it brought me a lot of comfort to say, here's somebody who's done a lot of that struggle, and I feel that.
That's good. Yeah, I haven't had that one recommended yet, so I have
one.
heard the book, though. So, okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, man, the best piece of advice I ever received. It was probably just to remember that I married way, way, way up, and never forget that.
Yeah.
But I think we both did that. So
yes.
I think that piece of advice.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I don't know if I really got that, but I somehow managed to do it. So that's a good thing. Aaron, my man, it's been a pleasure to host you in our brand new studio. Thank you for being the first guest here. But just thanks for being a great partner too with us. I know our advisors just love Riskalyze and what it's done to help them better serve their clients. I know you're fairly active on social media. Yeah. Can you just share how can people stay connected, learn more about you, whatever they want to do?
Yeah, Twitter is probably the place I stay the most. Me and Elon Musk apparently. So there you go. At Aaron Klein on Twitter. I love connecting with great financial advisors. It just makes my day.
Yeah, you're always fun to follow on there.
Thank you.
It's a lot of time. So appreciate you doing it. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this episode of the Business of Advice podcast, hit subscribe, join us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn so you know anytime we drop new episodes. And more importantly, if you found this episode valuable, go leave a 5-star review and share this with others so they know that it's a great use of their time. Thanks for listening.